The UK, good. We're international. I like when we're international. Okay, from Venezuela, LA by way of Venezuela, Southern California, Virginia Beach, Toronto. UK, good. We're international. I like when we're international. Okay, from Venezuela, LA by way of Venezuela. Oh, we are live on YouTube. This is exciting. All right, I'm gonna pin myself. Hey, everybody, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. My name, if you don't know who I am, I'm Daniel. I'm Daniel Shankin. I'm the founder of Mount Tam Psychedelic Integration, and we offer education and support, training and coaching for people who are deeply committed to transformation, healing, and growth, and who often use psychedelics to support that aim. Um, and this is part of our programming. I thought this would be fun to do. Sometimes I whip up like a little mini slide deck on Instagram and think to myself, I could talk about this for an hour. And so this is where we are. This has brought us here. Um, if you might notice, my co-host Joshua Jupiter from Brooklyn Balance Integration is here as well. Josh is a graduate of the Integration Coaching Training Program. He's got his own practice in Brooklyn, and he'll be sort of co-hosting, which means if there's any sort of logistical, any little things that are a problem, you can direct it to him. Also, if you misbehave, he'll be the person showing you the door, as it were. Thank you. Thank you for your support, Josh. Um,
Anytime.
all right. Oh, very good. Arapaho, Cheyenne, Ute, and Sioux land. I'm a Mohican land, or Muncie, Stockbridge, Muncie land. More folks coming in. Jai Hanuman. Yes, if you have a psychedelically inspired relationship with a spirit guide or a deity, feel free to invoke them in the chat like David has done. That's fun. Let me know where you're from and who you're with. Which deity, spirit guide you are traveling with, right? There is a term in Sanskrit called brahmacharya, which often tends to mean kind of modesty or celibacy, but literally translates to mean to walk with God, right? The God, to have God as your vehicle, or some such. You can translate Sanskrit a lot of different ways. Um, One of my favorite Sanskrit jokes is I think it comes out of Oxford, and they say that all um, Sanskrit words mean themselves, their opposite, a goddess, a sexual position, and something that has to do with an elephant. So there you have it. All right. Aphrodite and Kuan Yin, beautiful. Fabulous. All right. I'm going to, you can keep them going. You can keep your invocation to the divine going. Um, Atheists, agnostics, certainly welcome as well. I'm not trying to convert anybody to anything, except some of my friends who use Google phones. I'm trying to convert them to Apple iPhones. But yeah, that's my mission. I'm a missionary. Also trying to convert uh, psychedelic users to meditators. All right, sometimes people might think that I am a advocate of psychedelics, and maybe, but really I'm an advocate of meditation practices for psychedelic users. All right. So there we have it. Kali, yeah, Jai Kali Ma in Chicago. It's a good Kali town, Chicago. Share my screen. Is that working? Got my screen. All right, cool. So, again, if you saw the slides um, on Instagram, you would have seen this slide. Foundations of the psychedelic experience. This is based on, you see at the bottom it says loosely based on the Satipatthana Sutra, which is a text on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And so it's a little bit adapted from that, and we will not get too into the historics of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but you'll kind of see it, and if you know it, you'll see as we go. So again, this is me. I'm Daniel. I've introduced myself already. The things that I do: I have a year-long coaching training program, a 6-week meditation for the journey intensive, which is kind of like using various meditation practices for trip sitting self and others. I coach. We have integration circles. We have online conferences, and I teach, and I get weird on social media. Right. This free talk is kind of it's a teaser for my 6-week class. So if you go to Tam Integration, you'll see that I have a 6-week class. It actually lasts longer than 6 weeks, but we meet 6 times. But then we have weekly meditations on Monday and Wednesday as well for about a half hour. And you'll get those for about 7 or 8 weeks. And then we have a community space afterwards, so group coaching and meditations and things like that. You can save 10% off with the coupon code Foundation10. Right now, I also made a coupon code Foundation20, so you can save 20% off. But I'm going to delete that coupon right after class. That's like your scarcity marketing is you've got an hour and a half to get 20% off, and then you'll only get 10. So forgive my shameless marketing, but it's the nature of feeding the children. It's a great class, if I do say so myself, and there might be some people who are graduates of it who could maybe speak to it in the chat. I'm also doing a day-long coaching intensive on January 15th. You can also save 20% off on that too, or 10 with the same coupon code. Just, about 4 hours of just coaching skills, just tools. And it will be an exploration and expansion of the tools of the model that we're going to be looking at now. Josh, I'm not going to look at the chat, but Josh, if there's something that's super pressing, you can let me know. Just so you know that, these are tools that come from the East. I don't come from the East. I come from Philly, but I've been studying, these traditions for a long time, and a portion of the profits go to feed people and support people from the traditions where my teachers come from, right? So just so you know that, we're giving back, we're doing what we can. We have a fundraiser for Baba's Feed Project on Instagram. Right now, we're trying to raise $1,000 in the next couple of days. So check that out as well if you want to help out. This is not complicated stuff that we're doing, right? This is the basics. If you come and you're like, wait, that guy just talked about the basics for an hour. I know, right? Suzuki Roshi said, always remain a beginner. This is the secret of Zen. It is my hope that I will give you a perspective on the basics that is useful to you. And they're like, oh, okay, I didn't look at it like that, and cool, but it's not if you think that there's going to be some sort of secret teaching, you are sorely mistaken. So what we were talking about is experience, right? It's we have experience. Some of us might even be experience junkies. Some of us might be experience connoisseurs, right? I believe it was Rumi who said, any wine will get you drunk, become a connoisseur. He was talking about experience, right? That we want to go for rarefied, sublime experiences. And this is kind of what happens when we are doing things like psychedelic use or tantra or meditation or things like that, is that we are trying to have a better class of experience than we often get just like in everyday life. Um, However, the categories of experience generally stays the same. That if you look at the way we experience things, there's basically only five things that are going on at any given time, right? And this is physical sensations, thoughts, emotions, relationships to the outside world, be it other people or things or gods and deities or, discarnate beings. That's four. And then kind of like the ineffable, like awareness of awareness, witness consciousness, right? And so this is what's happening in our field. And some of it is above kind of in our conscious awareness, and some of it's going on underneath, right? Subconsciously, right? And that's one of the fun things about psychedelics is that it brings unconscious experiences to the conscious. You're like, oh my God, I've been sad about that for like the past 30 years, right? Maybe I should feel it, right? But the sadness is just emotion, right? And some of the experiences might be highly unusual, right? Like we might like right now I can see things, right? I see you, I see your beautiful faces. I see, I've got a cat bus here, if anybody knows cat bus, because I have small children, right? I mean, I might have it anyway, but I can say it's because I have small children. So I see that stuff. Sometimes when I'm on on psychedelics, I see in extra dimensional geometry, right? But still seeing it, still a vision, right? See what I'm getting at? So let's just talk about these. Let's just run through these things. One thing to note is that all of the things that we experience, and we're actually going to look at this slide again at the end. But I just want to note that everything that we experience runs along a spectrum of pleasant to unpleasant, right? It's like I could have an emotion that I like. I could have an emotion that I don't like, right? I could be in the car. And what is interesting about that is that it's all very subjective, right? There's a lot of subjectivity to it, which is to say that uh, have you ever been in a car on a road trip and be unable to agree on what music to listen to? And somebody else loves music that you hate, right? And so this is where kind of the Buddhists get the term like emptiness, like it's empty of essential quality. It has the quality that we give it. Some people, um, and then that goes for all music except for the Grateful Dead, which is objectively the best, right? But you know what I mean? It's and some of you think that's ridiculous, but so anyway, this picture of course, if you've seen it up close, there are down below under him are all sorts of like nasty, creepy, demonic beings. And then above him are all sorts of like enlightened beings, like Buddhas and angels and things like that. And then this, everybody knows this guy up here in the upper left corner. But we've got a guy and he's bowing, he's prostrating, and he's trying to like let go of the stuff into the darkness and let in more light, right? So the continuum of like God, the devil, right? Angels and demons, right? Good and bad. This kind of duality is constantly inner overlaid onto the various aspects of our experience, right? We'll talk more about how we build our identity around that later, but we talked a little bit about it as far as music goes. So physical sensations, right? Tension, relaxation, hot, cold, expansion, contraction, aches, openness, movement, energetic waves, and spirals, right? So on a very like basic level, like we all feel hot and cold, right? That's not news. So we have tension, right? You see this woman with tension in her back. Sometimes we feel relaxation, right? And sometimes if we're lucky, we feel our chakras spinning and we feel energy spiraling and moving up and moving down, fortunately or unfortunately. Waves, we might feel like melting. We might feel like the experience of like the heart bursting, like energy radiating from the heart, these sorts of things. But when we think about physical sensations, um, is really my rule of thumb when I'm talking to my clients and trying to get them to really speak about their physical sensations, is I ask them for sensations and locations, right? Because if you say, how does it feel in your body? And somebody says something like, it reminds me of a time when I was in those hot springs, right? That's not a that's a story, right? That's not an immediate description of a sensation. And depending on who you're talking to, like there are neuro like neurodiversity being a thing, is that there are some people that that people describe things differently. But if you can get people to become like more immediate and more precise about their locations, um, the more those things might open up, right? And so again, um, the idea, if we think about the last slide, the continuum of pleasant to unpleasant, is just the real key is to kind of see if we can extract the judgment from the sensation, right? So it's like my shoulder, it's like I hate it. I just hate it. I'm just mad at it, right? It's like, okay, well, it's tight, right? It's tight. So just like drop the hate for a second, like give yourself a break and just feel the thing as the thing. It's kind of what we're going for, right? So that is physical sensations, right? It could be good, they could be bad. What is tricky is sometimes, um, we will avoid, we love to avoid painful things. And sometimes we avoid them with painkillers or alcohol, or we could smoke pot, or we could eat chocolate, or we could just watch TV and disassociate. We could do any number of things to get out of it. But we might build ego structures up. And so sometimes I really love, words like surrender are so fraught. It's like, just surrender your tension, like just surrender, just let go. But like relaxing gets a bad rap because we sometimes think that means, oh, I'm sitting by the pool, like sipping a drink with an umbrella in it, instead of thinking that a deep relaxation in the body is also a deep unwinding of various other psychospiritual tensions, right? And then the feeling. So I really love the like the rock and roll term of like, oh, that song's really a face melter. I love the idea of like melting. Like that's what we used to sit like, when, younger days, we would refer to our psychedelic sessions as, oh, we're just melting down, because like it literally felt like we were melting, right? It's a great thing. Great practice. Just melt. As my Tai Chi teacher will say, sink. My Tai Chi teacher is really into sinking our energy. She'll just make us stand there forever and just sink and sink and sink. Emotions. On a scale of cat, how are you feeling today? Right. Um, I think I'm a 6. You can drop in the chat. Okay, we've got a 3 here. Yeah, you can either put it in the chat, or if you're on screen, you can give me some fingers. You can show me some fingers. If anybody's 7, we got a 7 here. Okay, we got a 7 and a 3. So the interesting thing about emotions is and with all of this stuff, we've decided that some of them are more acceptable than the others. We might have been taught that we're not allowed to be angry. We might have been taught that it's kind of not safe to be friendly, right? So just figuring out, and then, of course, shame hides itself because it's so painful, right? Because it goes right to the identity. And so, getting people to talk, how are you feeling today? And people just say, good, again, back with these dualistic descriptions. Oh, somebody's hungover. Okay, got a 9. I'm projecting, but that's good. Nine's a good one. I can relate. But again, kind of moving away from just how are you feeling, good, bad. I'm feeling bad. It's like I'm sad. guilty. I feel guilty. I've got hatred, right? And kind of like owning it and letting it be there. A lot of the times, we talked about qualities of safety. It's we might not feel like it's safe for us to be angry. What if we hurt somebody or break something, right? What if we damage or destroy something ourselves or others, and we don't have, a safe space for anger, right? And of course, a safe space doesn't mean we're not angry. It just means that, like, it can be witnessed, right? Or received without compounding shame or without creating any damage. And so hopefully if you are a psychedelic space holder, right, you can um, be okay with some unprocessed rage from time to time, you know, with your clients, because you don't know if it's going to go. It's like we never know what's underneath the surface. That's why we call it underneath the surface. And we certainly don't want to compound um, shame, right, or guilt. And we're looking at like ecstasy, right? It's one of my favorite emotions, of course, right? So I find it very pleasant and pleasurable. And what was I going to say about ecstasy? Um, oh, just the prevailing kind of somatic trauma wisdom that a lot of our traumatic experiences are healed by happiness and pleasure and joy, right? Is that having some fun? People sometimes, very, very serious people might come to psychedelics and not realize that they're allowed to have fun doing them. That the having fun doing them is often part of the healing. Um, yeah. Um, I was in a talk with Bessel van der Kolk one time, and he said one of the greatest tools, other than MDMA, for healing trauma, is a beach ball, right? Because it's like a fun, safe, connective community activity. And he has a video of him working with a family, and there's this mother and a child, and they're very unhappy, and like, they're closed off and they're frustrated, and they're like, um, you know, having a time, and they're not connected, and they're mad at each other. And he walks in, or maybe it's one of his people, walks in and was like, throws a beach ball in between them. And the next thing you know, they're like playing catch with the beach ball. Uh, I don't hear about them being used very much in psychedelic sessions, but um, if you give it a shot, report back, would you? That'd be great. We're tracking so far. Questions, comments? Cruising through this stuff. Wait, how'd you make that bubble happen, Levi? Is that like new?
So on some versions of Mac OS, you can now do certain gestures, and some of them are kind of cool. If you do two thumbs up, you get fireworks. That's my favorite one.
With your body, it just sees your body.
It's just automatic, and you can get hearts, but it depends on what version of Mac OS you have. I don't know what the rules are, but if you do thumbs down, that would be a cool one. But you get raindrops this way, all sorts of weird stuff.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
We're in the future. All right, so thoughts. Oh, so the interesting thing also, I just want to talk about fear for a moment. I tell this story all the time. So if you've been you've heard me talk about fear, I probably told this, is that we're talking about, like, the safety and things like that, is that um sometimes, like, oftentimes, you know, it it's an inside job, was what we're getting at, is that it's an inside job, which is to say, um fear is sometimes an appropriate response to externals, right? It's like sometimes something that's like threatening happens and we respond appropriately with fear, and then we hopefully get to safety and we can come back to center, right? Sort of a neutral situation. But sometimes, because of things that have happened in the past, unprocessed, this stuff doesn't get processed, right? And so we're holding on to it. And so things look scary that aren't, right? So, I was talking to somebody once who, um, and I've had similar experiences. I'll tell you the other person's story, and I'll tell you mine. But this was, me as a coach, as somebody was at a ceremony in a yurt, and they were like, it was really scary. And I was like, why? We're like, was there something like particularly menacing about this yurt in Sonoma? And they're like, no, no, it was a gorgeous yurt. It was beautifully appointed, and like everything was like perfect. And I was like, okay, well, were the facilitators like unethical, or were they like mean to you, or like they were unskilled or bad or something? And they were like, no, no, the facilitators were amazing. It was just scary. And I was like, well, were the other people like mean to you or threatening or like unethical or bad in some way? Like, no, no, everybody was awesome and I made some friends. It was just scary. And so I was like, oh, so what you're telling me is fear came up. And they were like, yes, fear came up. Right. And so we have to realize that, like it's a potluck. It's an emotional potluck, and we're eating what we bring. Right. Um, I had an experience similar to that. And this is where these things start to connect. Right. So it's interesting. It's important to see how these foundations like weave into each other. And then also it's really important to be able to see one from another, right? Like I was in another ceremony and I was feeling threatened. And the thoughts were, right, thoughts are next. I can move to thoughts. Um, the thoughts were that these people are out to get me. They don't really like me. And someone's gonna do something mean to me, and somebody's gonna make fun of me, or I'm gonna be ostracized or rejected, or something like that. Um, yeah, you can smile or put like some sort of emoji in the chat if you can relate to, having those paranoid moments where everybody else in the ceremony is about to gang up on you. It's actually, I believe, in the trip report I'm going to read shortly. Um, no emojis. I'm the only one, huh? I knew it. You guys are out to get me. Okay, you too. So I was having those thoughts, and then I heard this wise voice in my head, the voice that I like to believe, right? And it said, why don't you unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders, and release your fists? And I was like, am I doing all that? And it was like, yeah, yeah, you're totally like everything is tense. And sure enough, like that's how I was sitting. And I relaxed my jaw and dropped my shoulders and released my fists, and balance was restored to the force. And it was no longer a threatening space, and nobody was out to get me. And it was just all that old fear and all those old thoughts that sort of mixed together with my physicality to kind of create a perceptual filter that things were not okay. And it was just stuff that, I was carrying around. I feel comfortable telling you this because I know you're carrying it around too, your own particular flavor. And it got brought to the surface and it got witnessed. And a layer, I can't, I would love to tell you that it all went, but at least a layer of it did. Right. And so this happens with our thoughts too. Right. So our thoughts, this is where we kind of round. So many of us are very comfortable with our thoughts. Our thought using our minds is highly preferred in our culture. right? It's how many of us succeed is by using our minds, is by solving problems with our cognition, with our intellect, right? And it's interesting, the yogis have a difference between intelligence and intellect, right? Which I'll let you just marinate on that. But right, the intellect is sort of kind of very just sort of cognitive supremacy. This is just sort of like, I'm going to solve my way out of this paper bag. And so we take these emotions that are amorphous and confusing. Did I mention that emotions are amorphous and confusing? Right. So I don't know if I said that they shift, right? You can shift from feeling sad to happy like on a dime and kind of not know why, right? Your emotions can flow from shame to guilt to anger to relief to gratitude, right? Like quick, right? And so we often just round them up to good or bad, right? And that way we don't have to feel them, right? So we build ego structures around our feelings, right? So that we don't have to feel them. And sometimes those structures are sort of like a concrete or a pavement of thoughts and cognition and concepts, right? Kind of reminds me of the story of, God and the devil are walking down the street and God sees something shiny and he picks it up and he goes, "Oh, look, it's the truth." And the devil says, "I'll give it to me. I'll organize it for you." Right. So that's kind of what's happening in the head a lot. And again, we see that kind of perception and attitude is everything. Um, and maybe even related to somatic. So I want to just kind of relate thoughts to sensations, right? Because as we probably know, a lot of our ecstatic experiences like happen in the body, right? If you look at these two guys in the bottom right corner, right, they're both saying the same thing. What is different, right? What's different is their physicality, right? Nothing matters. Nothing matters, right? Like the phrase love is the answer, right? Has anybody like really known that? Can you put like a heart in the chat? Like if you were like really at like one point, like you didn't know like anything beyond like love is the answer and it was like the most true thing like for all times everywhere, right? And but if you just like, but then the joke is like, "Sir, this is a Wendy's." You know what I mean? Like if you don't have it in the body, if the heart space isn't open and the energy isn't flowing there, that's meaningless, right? It's all one. We're all connected. These phrases are only meaningful if they are embodied and living. Otherwise, it's just the back of a Bronner soap bottle, right? Shout out Bronners. And so we see that like our thoughts, our bodies, and our emotions kind of have to work together. Oh, I love that. I wish I was out on a walk too. I often am, right? Many of you might know me from walking in the woods. Uh, you might know me from the pickup line at preschool. All right, so relational. So that's sort of like the most like and of course we're relating. Like on some level, we are relating to our thoughts, our minds, and our emotions, right? We are witnessing them. They're sort of inanimate objects, right? To be witnessed. Like you pick up your emotions like a jewel and look at them from all angles. You can look at your thoughts like a jewel, right? So on one level, we're relating to those two, but for the sake of what's happening now, we're going to just say that they're outside things, right? Outside kind of the skin, right? The things on the other side of your skin. And that could be an inanimate object like a crystal or the sun, if you believe that, the earth, the light as it plays through, the music that comes through. It could be a very good boy, right? Could like this puppy we have here, could be an animal friend, right? This is like our sort of archetype of psychedelic love here is Sasha and Shulgin, right? So it might be your friends and family and lovers. And then of course I found this cool hippie Jesus, right? So it might be your spiritual connection, it might be a disembodied like ancestor, it could be an ancestor, a spirit guide, a deity, or something like that. Um, Things of that nature that we are relating to as well. And that can be some really powerful moments. One of the kind of most powerful things, a psychedelic experience that I'm really very interested in right now, that I think is really, really very powerful and lovely. Doesn't get talked about a lot because it's not necessarily very sexy, but it's the experience when um, you remember people that you've loved and you've lost. Right, that very poignant thing. You can, if you've got like a broken heart thing, you can throw that in, like, because like we have people in our lives that we love, and then we are not really talking about impermanence. We'll touch on impermanence. I didn't make a slide for it, but so all things are impermanent, right? Even the longest Grateful Dead song must come to an end, right? Right. Every sunset sets, right? Every sunrise rises. Things don't last forever. And so too with relationships, right? Somebody, even if you're, married forever, someone's going to outlive the other, right? Um, uh, and so sometimes people are not in our lives anymore, and it hurts. And maybe we think we grieve it, or maybe we kind of don't have time to, or we don't have the resources to. And then we just cover it up. We're just like, oh, maybe I'll get to that later, or like, oh, I know that, or we'll give it a platitude. They're in a better place, right? And so we don't think about it much. And then we do 5 grams of lemon tech, and then there they are. Surprise, right? We're like, oh, I didn't expect to think about that person that I miss. And it can be very, very poignant. We don't really love grief and loss and regret, betrayal. But they're there. They're in our fields, and we feel them because other people tend to mean a lot to us. And I think this is also part of the reason why the young kids today are so excited to give their parents psychedelics, right? Because these kids um, take psychedelics and then they remember that they love their parents, right? And then they want their parents to feel this love too. And it's like, you know what I mean? And so just kind of the relational aspect it's, I feel like, just a great place to kind of talk about impermanence and to talk about like this poignancy, because what we've got is kind of a mixed bag. And we'll talk about, so it's like, it would be cool if things were either pleasant or unpleasant only, but they're not. They're often mixed. Like I'm not sure, if we know this. We know this, that we have relationships with things and with ourselves, and that they are complex, right? Thanksgiving dinner is complex, right? Doing bittersweet. My blue, if I ever started a blues band, it would be called the Bittersweet Blues Band. Um, yeah, like I don't know if you guys have been on been shopping for Legos recently, but those things have somehow, because the nephews want Legos. Those things got expensive, like there's like $500 Millennium Falcons and things like that. So anyway, that's complicated. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich, simple. $500 Lego set, complicated. Thanksgiving dinner, relationships with other people, complex, right? Complex is often like um, has an element of chaos to it in that there's not predictable responses, right? There's so many. That's the interesting thing about relationships is that they are not predictable, right? The Legos, if you follow the instructions and all the pieces are there, you will eventually have the thing at the end, right? It's just complicated, but it's predictable. Relationships, unpredictable. Life, unpredictable. Psychedelic experiences, unpredictable, complex, chaotic, bittersweet. What a good boy is that dog. Can you even get over it? I looked at, I was looking at like 100 pictures of a dog and he just seemed like the very best good boy. Ah, pure presence. Can you just take a moment? Can we just take like 5 or 6 breaths to just be in pure presence together? I should have done this at the beginning, but here we are now. It's so soothing for the frontal lobe, isn't it? I'm going to try and keep some of this while I talk some more, but we're looking at a picture of Shiva on the left, right? Shiva is considered to be the embodiment of witness consciousness, of pure awareness and presence. Right? Everything else, all of nature, all of the things that move and change are Shakti. So those other four things that we were talking about are bodies that are born and they live and they grow old and they die. That's Shakti, right? That's matter, other matter. The seasons, right? Winter, spring, summer, autumn. Other people, our emotions that flow like the rivers, right? That's all Shakti. It's all inanimate objects. Shiva's the witness, right? The Buddha nature, we call it sometimes, or the self. There's another Alex Gray picture of like the clear light of the void. That it's just beyond the, gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi, swaha. Right? It's just the witness that's beyond the beyond the beyond. And sometimes we're there and there aren't words for it. Sometimes it doesn't even seem like there's a person there to witness it. Right? And so that's happening too. And so that is often witnessing. The tricky thing is it witnesses the emotions and it witnesses the thoughts and it witnesses the body. And then for whatever reason, they call it Maya, we don't really know why it happens. But there's an identification, right? For some reason, we think we're the stuff. And so the fun thing about our practices is that we get to, in the in the very beginning of the Yoga Sutras, um, tada drashtu swarupe vastanam, right? Right? Yoga chitta vritti narodaha tada drashtu swarupe vasana. Right? Yoga is the cessation of the identification with the thought waves of the mind. And so we do our practice so that we're not wrapped up in what we're not. Because you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions, you're not your body. We have them. If you stub your toe, it's still really gonna hurt. If somebody breaks your heart, it really hurts. But you're it and you're not. And so swarupa means one's own nature. So like here is our own nature, and we get to kind of rest in kind of the truth of our being, of kind of the essential self, which is nice, which is nice to get to from time to time. Um, and so that is the practice, right? Is to kind of be as established is another kind of neat word, like established in the self, the bliss of the self's true nature as much as possible, even as the other things are swirling around. And to be able to look at them and even be open and empathetic and compassionate with them, but to recognize who we really are this whole time. Right? And so again, you see, like, we build an identity around our opinions, right? If it's not safe to feel angry, we don't feel safe, and so we never get angry even when it's appropriate and somebody's crossed our boundary, right? That becomes part of our personality, right? If we're always people pleasing, or if we're always angry, if it's only safe to kind of be angry, I think about mobster movies, right? Goodfellas or something, where it's like the mode of survival requires anger and violence, and that just becomes the personality. And for us to think that, like, um, that's who they are, like we think, like, we get to sit here and be like, oh, I would never do that, but maybe probably you would, right? Probably we would, if there wasn't, if that's, yeah, you get it. So the thing is, how that works, right? Back to the continuum, is that on one side there's like agony, pain. On the other side, there's like joy and ecstasy and bliss. And there's, things we think are beautiful, things we think that are ugly, emotions that we like, emotions that we don't like, right? And then kind of in the middle, it's neutral. So it's like pure ecstasy, pleasure on one side, and like terrible agony on the other. And then kind of in the middle is like, I feel fine. And then, this mixed experience thing. So it's like there's some pleasure, there's some pain. It's kind of both happening at once. It's a little bit confusing, but okay. And so that's kind of what we're experiencing. Like, this is the stuff, this is like the stuff coming in, right? And then our response, is obvious, and you'll see this in your clients. Like, if they're avoiding, right, it means they're kind of moving away things that they think are unpleasant. If they're greedy or attached, right, they're moving towards things that they think will support their life and their identity, right? That's kind of another way of looking at um, pleasure and pain, is that which supports my identity, right? The stuff that makes me feel like I'm me. Like, if I'm talking and like I can see you like smiling and laughing at my jokes, like, I like you, right? Like, I can't help it. You know what I mean? It's just like knee jerk, because like you're supporting my identity as like funny guy. And if you're sitting there scowling at me, like, I maybe don't trust you so much, even though that might just be your face. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm projecting my own insecurity onto your scowl, but that's just your face. You just have resting face. That's just your face at rest, right? It's got nothing to do with me, right? And you see how we're doing that all the time. Um, it was tough to, like, when I first started teaching yoga, um, I had to rework my relationship with good-looking women, because like they weren't always nice to me when I was like a kid, like in high school, like the good looking girls like weren't necessarily nice to me, and they were like, and then I was in yoga class and there were good looking women there, and they were nice to me all of a sudden, and it was confusing. It was like, wait, you're supposed to be mean to me, like that's what I'm used to. And so it was just sort of like having to kind of reprogram, the way that I related to the world. And I'm sure you all do that. Like, you sort of go around with preconceived notions about things that are then proven false, hopefully, right? And you're like, oh, the world is bigger than I expected it. Not all dogs are scary. People have fear of dogs, and then all of a sudden, because there was one mean dog. Like, all it takes is one mean dog, at the right developmental stage. So again, what is tricky, and you start to get like, some real interesting expressions, from people in the body moving through, when there's like frustration, right? And repression, right? Because people when there's a mixed experience, like people kind of want to move towards and they kind of want to move away, and they kind of want to move towards, they kind of want to move away, and they get this sort of like, confused or disorganized attachment kind of thing. And they can, it's like, I don't know what to do, right? Like just to go to it, like I know to go to it, or if I go away, I know to go away. But if I don't know what to do, that's all we don't know, right? And then that's frustrated energy in the nervous system, right? Um, and so I see you have, yeah. So there you go. So the frustration and giving ourselves like space again, the safety of a space to kind of express through our body and to get those frustrated impulses out, because apparently they don't just evaporate. They're like a boot on your car. Like they're super hard to get off. You can't just, they don't just go away. Parking tickets kind of got to pay the piper through your body. And so, um, being able to look for that, looking for the expressions of these, like in your or your client's experience, um, can be really handy. You can, if somebody has that kind of frustration and confusion, you can just be like, you can just pro and con it with them. It's like, well, what's drawing you to it? What's drawing you away from it? Like, what's pleasant about it? Like, what's attractive? What's unattractive? Just again, like real simple questions. Real simple questions, and you guys probably know this. Um, Real simple questions go a much further than advice, right? Somebody was like, "Oh, well, I'm confused. I don't know whether to like move towards it or move away from it." And then you're just like, "Oh, I'm the coach. Just move towards it." Right? It's like this world is too full of coaches who just say, "Oh, just move towards it." Right? Instead of like getting a better lay of the land, because people are like fractals, right? Has anybody ever taken a psychedelic and realized that you're like an infinite fractal? Well, everybody else is too. Drop a fractal in the chat, right? So everybody else is too. And so if you just kind of decide for them, um, at the best case scenario is that your advice is useless, right? This is, it could be unhelpful or harmful or something else. And so rather than being like, oh, just go and do it, to investigate, and you can just investigate these 4 or 5 areas, right? And if you noticed, like, I get excited doing these, like I get a little like worked up and a little bit, nervous and, excited in my body. It's like I'm on the edge of my seat a little bit and I talk really fast. And then we got to pure presence and I was like, oh, right. And I dropped in and we all got to drop in, and like my frontal lobe got peaceful and like it changed. And so that's one of the nice things about working with psychonauts, is that they've touched that off quite often, right? And so even if there's like the struggle of bouncing back and forth along this continuum in these various 4 aspects of their experience, to be like, oh, well, let's take a moment to resource. Like, let's take a moment to like remember that, like, hey, you remember that love is the answer, and like the chat went wild, right? Right. And so just like being with your client, be like, let's just do that for a minute, right? And then let's look back at my emotions and my thoughts and my sensations again. Right? It's good fun. What's my next thing? Right. And so this brings clarity, right? And we've got MC Etcher looking at himself, and we've got Ram Dass and Be Here Now. You're standing on a bridge watching yourself go by. So this understanding allows you to unwind and organize your experience, right? So excuse me, there's nothing wrong with judgment, right? Essentially, judgment is empty like everything else, if you're using it with wisdom, right? I mean, if you, like, you're allowed to like have a favorite cheese. You know what I mean? You're allowed to prefer this over that. You're allowed to kind of decide what is ethical and moral for you. Like, this is all cool stuff. It's like when it gets in the way of like your actual perception of reality is where you get run into a problem, right? It's like if you're judging, one of your students because they have a face that they have nothing to do with, because their face reminds you of somebody from high school, you got a problem. So we start to kind of notice that, like, oh, that's that thing, and oh, that's that thing, and that's how they connect, and they exist on their own, and they also exist in relationship. And I kind of exist on my own, and I kind of exist in relationship. Um, Thoughts, comments, or questions? I'm going to pull up a different thing, and I'm going to ask you to maybe take a couple of notes. I'm going to ask you to actually, if you could, if you have a notepad, just kind of write down, thoughts, emotions, sensations, relationship, pure presence, and give them columns. Does that make sense? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read you a trip report. Melissa, her name has been changed. It's a 200 milligram lozenge of ketamine. And then I also want you to know that we've zhuzhed this up to make it more like a thing, like to make it work for this better. Can I say the categories again? Yes, David got it. And then we've also got relational in there as well. And so what I'm going to read it to you, and then I want you to like stick stuff that you hear in each of the category. And I just want to make this clear that if you're a coach or, a baby, a budding coach or a therapist or something like that, that like, I don't necessarily suggest you don't have to do this with them and make them put it all in, but like, hopefully you're just tracking, right? And then you do whatever you want to do with it. So this is not, this is just a little snapshot. You would then do what you decide to do with this, right? It's just kind of a framework for curiosity and the like. All right. As the medicine took hold, I let a wave of sadness sweep over me. I had an issue with my husband earlier that day, and I could have handled it better. I was a little embarrassed and felt longing for a deeper connection with him. That passed pretty quickly, and I was surprised. But then there was this fear that was really old, and I started to breathe so I could face it. It was fear that everybody hated me, and there was this energy that I wasn't sure if it was part of me, but it hated me. It was in my head and neck, where I've gotten headaches for years. It was tight and dark. I breathed some more. The tension in my head released, and so did the idea that nobody liked me. Particles came out of my head and neck, and the tension was released. The particles became horses that ran through the sky, and sometimes it looked like they were running through ocean surf. The fear mostly abated, but the hatred was still there. It felt tight in my chest, and it was hard to breathe. I had to check to make sure there wasn't anything on top of my body. The energy became dark and red, like a dark place in a hell realm. It was reacting to the hate inside of me. I called out to God, and I felt myself rising up, literally like I was being transported upward. I was quite impressed by the responsiveness. It was a bright, golden, I was in a bright golden area. It was round, surrounded by archways that opened to blue sky and water. In the center was a golden abstract shifting sculpture. I said, that's not God. And the message that came back said, no, but it's closer than you were before. I couldn't argue. I started to pray to God to help me remove the hatred so I could love my family better. I kept playing, please show me how to love, with different people's names in there. My family, other people in my life. Looking back, I didn't say myself, but having the love come through me and removing this hate, this nasty hate, was enough self-love. This kept me in a very good space for the rest of the journey as the hatred slowly let go. I think most of it released. It feels raw, but if I remember to love it, it's very soothing and I feel peaceful and hopeful. At some point, the focus shifted from my heart to my belly. There was a dark cloud in there as well. It was swirling. There was heaviness and pressure and motion. It wasn't nice. I was afraid of it. I called in Christ's energy, Jesus. Jesus came in like a big sweeping energy and dispersed the cloud. It moved up and out of my belly, and it looked like a dark tornado as it dissipated. It also felt raw after this, and I put my hands on my belly and breathed love there too. My hands were warm with love, and it helped. There was some deep tightness in my belly, and it continued to release some sludgy stuff as it softened. At this point, I became very distracted by the pressure in my bladder. It took most of my attention. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to get to the bathroom, but I could. The journey was mostly over at this point. When I came back to bed, I read a little bit of The Power of Now and then curled up to go to sleep. I could feel more tension gently letting go as I fell asleep. Cool. So this is the group participation part. What sensations were there? And you can just unmute yourself. Did you catch sensations?
Oodles of them.
Oodles of them. Oh, give me one or two.
The ones in the neck and shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first one that really stuck out to me.
Right. Cool.
Pressure in her head,
Right.
a full
Cool.
bladder later on.
The bladder. You know what's funny about the bladder is somebody said, I was doing this with another group, and they said, I feel like the bladder is relational. Because you know, they're like, when I'm on ketamine, I know that feeling, and it feels like the bladder is something else entirely. But yeah, the bladder pressure for sure.
Been with that. Had that experience before. It's weird.
Yeah. Whose bladder is this?
Right.
Or as somebody once said, I don't know who, but somebody peed my pants. Other sensations?
Parts to the belly, the swirling sensation.
Good, Hannah. Yeah, like the more subtle ones like that.
Well, she experienced Christ consciousness as a sensation. Like, and she says that. She also experienced a golden light as a sensation.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, it came in like a big sweeping energy. It moved in and up and out of my belly. Cool. Yes, tightness in the chest. Right on. And so what do we have for emotions?
Hatred.
Hatred.
Fear also.
Fear.
Sadness, shame, and surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Peaceful and hopeful also in the end.
Right, hopeful in the end. Peaceful and hopeful.
Rawness too.
Rawness, yeah, that almost like an emotional hangover kind of thing. What about thoughts? Thank you, everybody, so far.
I had hatred as a thought.
Hatred as a thought. Cool.
Space.
She had a lot of
That could almost be a question for the client, is like, do you feel like that hatred is more of an emotion or more of like a line of thought? and it'd probably be really interesting what their response would be, and that would probably give you a lot more to work with and look at. Prayer and request as a thought.
Images like horses running in the sky or dark clouds.
Right. I would almost, I like that. I would almost put the horses as relational. Because relational, like when you get into the subtleties, it's like relational is almost like visionary. Right? There's that question of like, is the horse a representation of my subconscious mind? Or is it actually a spirit horse? Or is it a transpersonal horse? So could be a thought too. Yeah.
The thought that that image they saw was not really God.
Right. Hey, who are you? Right. That. What other things?
They worried about not making it to the bathroom.
Right.
Their thoughts were also, they had a sensation of regret about a miscommunication they'd had with their husband earlier. That was in the beginning.
Right. Yes.
This one feels like relational and thought, but no one likes me, or please show me how to love
Yes.
family members.
Right. Yeah. So we're seeing that there's none of them really exist in a vacuum. Right. We sort of classify them for ease of conversation and exploration, but we see that they do weave together. This is good. What else do we have for, what do we have for relational?
The husband, everyone, and Jesus.
Cool. Yeah.
I have dark energy and golden beauty.
Right. Dark energy. Yes. There was the statue, right? That seemed to kind of be like a thing that figured into this. Like there was a shifting statue in this kind of palace.
The sludge that was released from their body.
Right. The sludge. Right. The golden area, Christ consciousness. Right. So any insights? I'm curious, like any insights on how this might be useful to you?
This is kind of meta, but I feel like hearing some of the things that other people said, even in this exercise of being like, oh, I didn't even hear that part of just noticing like what stands out is what stands out to me.
Right.
So
And
that's
think-
useful
go
in
ahead.
itself. Oh, it's just useful in itself to notice that.
Right. And that's the interesting thing about people asking questions like, oh, is psychedelic coaching, psychedelic integration, psychedelic therapy, is it already oversaturated? It's like, well, first of all, no, not even close. And second of all, your clients are going to be drawn to, they want your perspective. Right. So it's not to be too bumper stickery, but we each have a unique medicine that we offer. And there are people that I can relate to, that I can serve, that you can't, and vice versa. Right. Regardless of training or skill or whatever. It's just like you see the thing, and then your rapport, and then the relationship you have with them is going to be evocative in a very, very special way. But just what I wanted to show you, and this is quick, we're spending, an hour 20, an hour and a half together. You can only do so much, but sometimes, you know, I talk to folks who are starting to talk to people about their experiences, and they're trying to do it in a service-oriented kind of way, because it's one thing to listen to your friend tell you the story and to be like, whoa, that's crazy, right? And that's, you know, that's what friends are for, to be like, whoa, that was crazy, man. It's another to set yourself up to be useful to them. And so hopefully you see that, like, here are doorways. You know, somebody gives you like a big torrential story of like of an experience that has all kinds of crazy things happening. And like, Lynn, like all you need is like one door. You know, I had one teacher who said, like, if you see a portal, go through it. And if you see three, pick one. Right. So if you're like, oh, there's like, you know, there was embarrassment and there was fear, and there was like this relationship to God. And then it's just like, then you've got three. That's all. Three is more than enough. And then you can even ask, well, which one should we talk about first? Oh, I want to talk about the fear. Okay, great. You know, and so like the idea is just to kind of have a bit of a framework to kind of make sense of, and kind of like just run a comb through the matted hair of a psychedelic experience, so that, you know, you can give it a nice French braid or whatever you want to do with it. How is this? Any tips for touchstones during solo exploration? You know, post-it notes. Post-it notes. I keep post-it notes nearby often when I'm meditating too. I don't know if anybody has ever sat down to meditation and they're trying to, like, you know, merge into the bliss of the oneness, and it's just like, you got to pay AT&T. You got to pay AT&T. You got to pay AT&T and pick up your laundry. You got to pay AT&T, and you can't get that out of your head, right? And so that is your mind looking out for you, because it's bad if you don't pay AT&T. Like, there'll be a fee, they'll turn your phone off, whatever it is, you got to do it. And your mind was not really designed to remember the amount of stuff that we have to remember in modern society, right? Your mind was designed to have like 25 people in your life and to eat berries. Joan, I love you, you know, good to see you. So that makes sense. So like, your mind was designed to think creatively, right? Your mind was designed for creativity, not memorization. So if you have like a trusted container, post-it note, notebook, and then you just write down, pay AT&T, it goes away. It's like a banishing ritual. And so, you know, I have post-it notes all over the place that say things like, this is dedicated to the one I love, and then I is spelled EYE or something, you know, or, you know, make more space for unhurried time, you know, just weird, trippy stuff. Sometimes journal entries can get lost or shelved. Yeah, anything can happen. So that's my tip, is to just like let you don't have to do like full journals, but just like, you know, throw a sentence down sometimes can be really, really handy. And then my other tips for touchstones is, you know, if you have a meditation practice, then your awareness, your pure awareness, will often have more of a thread, right? We'll get less blown. The miracle, right? Thich Nhat Hanh has a great book called Miracle of Mindfulness. And it's a miracle. Like, it was a miracle when that voice said, hey, drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, everything's cool. Right? That's a miracle. However, the more I practice, the more miracles I get. Right? It's like my dad used to say, the harder I work, the luckier I get. Right? Or enlightenment, the Zen people say enlightenment is an accident and practice makes us accident prone. And so then the crazy thing, like the real wild thing about it all is, I mean, this is gonna blow your mind. Hold on. about touchstones for solo experiences, back to slides, is that I have a 6-week class on them. Dun, dun. So we're back to that. We're back to the sales pitch, is that I have a 6-week class that is like basically a psychedelic awakening toolkit full of touchstones and tools and things like that. And so, if you register now, Foundation 20, you get 20% off. I'm gonna eat lunch. I'm gonna delete that code. Foundation 10 will be available for the foreseeable future. And then, not to be too salesy, but this is late stage capitalism and everybody's got to eat. So I do want to just, okay, so Sky says recommended, I've taken it twice. So, and Josh has taken it once or twice. He loves it. Sky will be and I might ask you to speak in a moment, if you wouldn't mind. Let me stop sharing. And so Sky is leading Monday intention setting meditation. So when you take the class, we meet on Fridays at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and then same time on Monday for a half hour. Sky's leading intention setting meditation, and then I'm leading a meditation on the Wednesdays, most of them. And so, Sky, you want to say hi real quick? Talk about meditation practice, psychedelics?
Yeah. Sorry for my
Thank you.
tardiness. That's where I was this morning.
We're leading meditation.
I was leading meditation. Yeah. And thank you for this. Yeah, the touchstones. Wow. That's like the touchstones. I think the number one thing is practice. Like you said it, right? It's like the way that we touchstone the most isn't looking at a sticky note. It's doing what the sticky note says. So put a sticky note on there that says, come meditate with Sky on Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific and 12 Eastern, and every week I lead a little bit of breath work from my experience from the tradition. I'm a Kundalini yoga teacher. And so it's not like hypertrophic, it's really like balancing, focused on, just like good things and intention setting for the week. So yeah. Very happy to be here, very happy to serve in this way, and happy to have a place where I have the accountability for my own touchstone. Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Daniel.
Oh, man. Thank you much.
Yeah, I have a couple of things this week too. I'm not going to plug myself, but I have a yoga nidra. I have a couple of things to relax this week. So Wednesday, I'm doing a masterclass for deep rest and relaxation, which correlates into letting go and allowing some experience to flow through our body. And then on Thursday for the winter solstice at 8 p.m., I have yoga nidra that I'm going to be leading. It's 8 p.m. Pacific. So even if you're on the East Coast, it's 11 p.m. And if you're, kind of like that person who stays up late on their phone, maybe come be on the screen with me and do a nidra instead and see what it's like. Yeah. I'll throw a couple links in the chat here before we close. And I will go back to deep breathing.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you have really much appreciated? And I might see you at your yoga nidra actually. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the past, either the 6-week class or the day-long training or the content that we've just covered? I will cease, unless people have specific questions about class, I will cease trying to sell it. And will make myself available for the next 10 minutes to answer questions about what we've just talked about.
Yeah, so one thing that came up for me is you were talking about how advice can be useless or even unhelpful or harmful, and that certain phrases and sort of like epiphanies can come off like platitudes. And not only did I know that, and I've experienced both sides of it, where it's just like I have an experience that teaches me that love is everything, and then after everything is kind of settled back in again, it becomes a platitude.
Mm-hmm.
And so on one hand, I feel like holding on to those platitudes is actually really important because it's like a reminder of something that I learned, and it's almost like having a sticky note.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I wonder, is it bad for me to keep the sticky note? Because it becomes a platitude and not embodied anymore.
Well, is the is the sticky note. So, you know, there's that one tradition of the Nichiren Buddhism where they have a scroll, like that's their altar. It's a scroll with a prayer on it. And you sit in front of the scroll and you meditate. And I had a friend who was at her scroll like every day at like 5 a.m, like doing the chant. Like I stayed over at her house a couple of times, and you would wake up to it, you know. And the thing is, I would go and I would sit next to her, and the thing like became a portal. Like it would open, you know, because I'm kind of psychedelically minded. So if like if, you know, there's an altar, like they start to glow for me. And it's a portal to a thing. And so is your sticky note that says love is the answer? Is it a souvenir or is it a portal? Right. And so it's begging us to return to it. Right. It's pointless if we're just like, yeah. If we see it with our minds, it's useless with their intellect. Right. If we see it with our hearts, then like that's the stuff. It's kind of like anybody can say the words take 10 breaths. The experience of taking 10 breaths is totally different. How's that land?
It does land, and that's in large part because I take a lot of notes about the things that I learn, and it's available for other people to read. So sometimes I look at it and I'm like, is it actually helpful for me to make this available to read? Is it the sticky note and it becomes a, you know, a souvenir, or can it be a portal? And I like that dichotomy. I like that distinction, and that's helpful.
Yeah. Cool, for sure. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Got time for one or two more?
Hi, this is Carlin in Western Massachusetts.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
You're my neighbor.
Where are you?
Great Barrington.
Oh, cool. Well, hi, neighbor. I'm wondering if one of the people who have been through the course would be willing to talk a little bit more about it from their point of view, what they got out of it and why they took it twice.
Oh, cool. Josh or Sky?
You want to rock, paper, scissors, Josh? You want to rock, paper, scissors?
And I can be pretty concise.
Do it. I think you have a little more experience. So, and I already spoke.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I only took it once, and I think it depends on. I look at it as a practice for myself, learning meditation, tools, skills, resources, and bringing that into my own personal practice for meditation, as well as into my own psychedelic practice for myself. And then also for learning to use for clients that I work with and teaching them what I learn and tweaking it in my own way to help them benefit during their psychedelic experiences as well as their everyday lives without psychedelics. So it's a great community building course because you really get to do it with some really dope, like-minded people. And I was partnered with somebody and we've become really great friends, and we meditated together once a week for a couple of months. We still touch base. Yeah, it's fun, it's knowledgeable, and it's expansive as well. And if you'd like to reach out to me later on with more questions, I'm happy to talk with you more in-depthly. I'll put my my email in the chat. Sky, have at it.
Thanks. Josh, do you like to be called Josh or Joshua?
Either or.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah,
Any other thoughts?
If you want another perspective, I can spend 2 minutes on it.
Let us have it.
I have done a lot of psychedelic work on my own in my life. And before I found Daniel, I didn't know that there was actually like integration circles like that where people were actually openly going into it. And so finding the community itself allowed me a place to unload so much of what had happened to me, so that coming into the present moment and moving through and like getting into that healing space, going through it the first time, I was just starting teaching yoga really consistently as well. And from the psychedelic meditation from the yogic perspective that Daniel gives was like, it just opened me up so much. And so I took it again, because the practices that I found, not only did they help me, they helped my family, they helped everyone else that I shared them with. And I actually used them avidly for a year and a half before I took the course again. And then when I took the course again, it really showed me the level of integration that I had. Whereas like I didn't have a lot of sticky notes, I didn't have the notes, I just had the experiential practice that was in me. So when I went back into the space again, I did get to connect with a wider community, but I also got to like fortify this like feeling of confidence that I was on the right path too, for me, because again, the meditation just leads us inward, right? And so we're all going to have a different experience with it, but highly recommended. There's like useful, there's I don't know if there's a better word for useful, invaluable tools that I've found in it and practices. And yeah, I wouldn't be here today without the course. I mean, sitting in this space, but also where I am on my healing journey and helping others. So that was 2 minutes.
Rad, right on time.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Very inspiring. Thank you both.
Cool. Carlin, where are you?
We're just outside Greenfield,
Got it.
just east of Greenfield, Mass.
Sure. Perfect. We have time for one more quick one.
What was the discount code again?
Foundation 20. Foundation 20. And there's the thing. And that works for 20% off either or, you know, the 6-week class or the day long.
Could you say anything else about the intensive coaching course, like for next January?
What else can I say about that? I mean, it's kind of like this. There'll be breakout rooms. You'll get a chance to practice stuff. So, you know, it's just, you know, it's as many tools as I can pack into 4 hours. And I can pack a lot into an hour. So it's just kind of designed around frameworks, mostly frameworks for inquiry. You know, it's like my coaching is very, as you sort of, as I've maybe mentioned, is very inquiry based. You know, less, you know, I feel like creating action plans with people is almost the easy part. It's, you know, helping people to kind of creatively look at their situations and what they want to create in a new way is a lot of where the magic happens, where awareness grows, and you can almost kind of bring them into a psychedelic state of awareness raising just through being present with them. So that kind of stuff.
So did I just understand correctly? You're saying that we'll practice these coaching techniques that you'll be showing us.
I'm doing something. So there's two things. There's a day-long coaching thing on Monday the 15th, and then there's a 6-week course that starts on the 19th. And really you should do them both. There won't be a lot of overlap between them, but there'll be a little bit.
So you were just talking about the day-long.
A day-long. Suryo asked about the day-long. Sorry about the confusion there. I should probably only have one thing happening at a time.
Well, I haven't been to the site yet, so I just don't have the basic details.
Sure. Yeah.
How often do you do that 6-week class?
Like twice a year.
Okay.
It'll probably happen again in the fall. Yeah. You know, summer, we're doing summer stuff. All right, very cool. I hope that you enjoy this. Yeah, I hope you found it pleasant. And I hope that our work together creates benefit for all beings. I hope that we become, beacons of light and wisdom and compassion for all beings, that they might know peace and happiness. Thank you for participating with me. Much love.